Good morning. This is Jeff Jarrett with eLaw. Thank you for joining our CLE webinar today. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick audio video check. You should be able to hopefully hear me, see a slide in the middle of the screen, and then see me over on the right. If there are any issues, you can dial in with the phone for audio, and there is technical support available as well on 1-800-733-416. If someone could just type in that they can hear me and see me, that would be great. Excellent, thank you for that. Perfect. Okay, well, let's get started then. Today we're discussing some case studies that we've done using Relativity, which is our review platform. We've titled it Practical Uses of Advanced Functionality and Integrated Case Management, which is a bit of a wordy title. I'll just want to start out here with a poll, basically asking from the audience what kind of organization you're with. Hopefully you should see that pop up on your screen there. So if you want to just go ahead and cast your vote there, we'll get an idea of the makeup of today's audience. Okay, so we mostly seem to have a law firm background with some corporate and a bit of government there and some other. I'll just lock it in. And part of the reason why I ask is today's CLE, we really talk about some advanced things we've done with review software. So probably the best audience reception will be if you've actually used some of the product before, or one of these kind of review products. Let me jump in through some more slides, and I'll ask some of your experience in a moment as well. So first, a bit of background who eLaw is. eLaw's 15 years old. We're a consulting company that provides services really embedded with the legal teams to assist with that review. We got our start working on a number of high-profile royal commissions around that 15-year mark. And now, of course, we provide e-discovery, the bureau services, some forensic consulting, really across the EDRM spectrum. We've had Relativity for about 4 years. Before that, some other products. We also offer another product, Helium. And we have offices in some of the major capital cities. Just a bit of background on myself. I'm originally from the U.S. and got my start at the U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York. They're getting exposure on the criminal side to some consumer fraud cases and a Ponzi investment scheme. Our office was famous for, well, not at the time, but my office worked on the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort case. So that was kind of exciting to see on the big screen. I've also worked as a consultant to a number of New York City law firms, and then I've been here at eLaw for the last 6 years as software products manager, really working with e-discovery and Relativity workflow, kind of helping our clients use the software. So as I was saying, today, originally this CLE was a presentation we developed really for, it was for a conference originally, attended by really litigation support professionals or experienced litigators who had done lots of kind of discovery review before. So we're going to show some kind of day-to-day, really practical advice potentially that these case studies could apply to. Hopefully the takeaway is from this that you'll realize that maybe some of these situations are a bit more commonplace and you could use them kind of on your next matter. So we have a number of case studies to work through. I might just launch another poll and ask what the experience level here is with review software. Ranging from, you've never heard of this, never seen any of this, you've reviewed it, or you're actually an administrator yourself. Okay, so we have some kind of new people to this kind of document electronic review world. So I'll dumb it down, so to speak, for a few when I'm explaining some of these case studies. I'll lock that in there. So today we're going to be talking about how we use the software in some unique ways, specifically managing large number of reviewers through advanced logic, using additional tables in the database. Everybody's familiar with the kind of documents table, just managing documents. There's actually other kind of things to manage in a case. Managing expert witnesses in massive document-intensive cases. Near duplicate analysis. The story of our lives seems to be duplicates are everywhere in litigation, and this is an instance where there was some kind of clever use of the software to help manage that. Reporting on junior reviewers, how to achieve consistency across your reviewers, and then finally we're going to talk a little bit about analytics in a case study we ran, which tries to compare kind of some older traditional tried and true methods of keywords and junior reviewers and compare them against some of the new technology that's coming out. Okay, so let's jump right in here. So our first case study was with a government agency. We had about 80,000 relevant documents. Now, so the review really consisted on, they had a complex subjective analysis, especially around privilege. They had multiple different kinds of privilege in this case. They had about 20 part-time staff. A lot of staff were either on different projects, or some were on study leave, and no one was really on this, or there was only a few of them were on it full-time. The rest were kind of coming in and out. So they required really an advanced workflow to help manage these various aspects. So I'll just show you our standard workflow. This is a really basic one that we have kind of out of the box for everyone who starts a case, and then we customize it as needed. So what this is saying here, that first little diamond there is a document relevant? If it isn't, it drops out of the review, kind of never to be seen again. If it is, it passes through and gets a privilege analysis. If it's privileged, it drops down to the left to the privileged list of documents. If it's not privileged, it drops down to the right to the list of documents. And if it's partially and needs a redaction, it goes to that middle path there. So this is just basic logic, which actually, a fair number of our cases, that's all they need. So in this government case, we actually designed quite a larger, more sophisticated workflow. And we came up with this diagram, which was actually the focus of many meetings we had kind of with the legal team, because we're helping them figure out, well, what do they actually need to do? And as we talked it out, we mapped it on this, and then we made the software reflect that. So what that means is, ultimately, this workflow, it probably started out with a similar kind of relevant analysis. Not relevant, get rid of it, and if it is relevant, move it down through these kind of boxes. And the boxes here in the middle all had to do with different types of privilege, and then what they did is certain teams were assigned to different boxes kind of in here. Some privilege even had a secondary privilege team reviewed it after the first one did, because they wanted to make sure they got it right. And ultimately, documents again moved down to the list of documents for disclosure, just having gone through a much more sophisticated kind of life. So ultimately, at the end, documents were reviewed against relevant issues. Really, that legal analysis was broken down, and the experts assigned to each section of it. That part-time staff, all they had to do was kind of, when they showed up, they logged in, and the documents were assigned to them in their specific batches. And new documents would show up as other members of the team were reviewing them. They would kind of flow to the appropriate people. So it really became this kind of core document, and then the software reflecting that, of the whole workflow of how they manage their case. Okay, so the next case study has to do, it was a construction matter. It revolved around financial payments and dispute between kind of where the payments had happened. So they didn't have a huge number of documents, about 150,000. They had a fair number of legal issues spread across about 30 different litigations. So one big matter, but kind of lots of various parties really suing them. So they had hundreds of companies involved, and then a big part of the case revolved around these payments. So they had thousands and thousands of payments. So it wasn't as much about the documents, but the actual payments themselves. So if you can imagine, they might have a listing, an accounting listing, which had, hundreds of payments on a few pages. Other times it have 10 different documents that just supported the existence of one payment. But they really just need to know about the payments, not necessarily the documents themselves. They were asking questions like, well, I want to know, which companies are involved in which litigation and related to which issue. Which documents relate to each company. More importantly, which payments relate to each company. And then how the payments relate to the various issues. And then ultimately which payments hurt the case or harm the case. So it kind of got away from documents. It was more about the payments themselves. So what we actually did in the case, I have this diagram, is we built additional tables in the software. So normally you come in, you have your documents, doc title, doc date, etc. In this, we had another tab at the top and actually have the payments, all information about payments listed in there. So it would have been, who the payment was to, who it was from, the amount of the payment, and we were able to kind of map everything. So not only do we have a payments table, we had an issues table and a companies table, and we were able to draw links between all of these various entities to be able to answer kind of the questions that they were asking in this matter. Okay, our next case study revolves around expert witness management. So we had a case where the state didn't adequately protect industry, and there was losses incurred. And it was a fairly scientifically advanced case. So lots of expert witnesses were involved. Now, these expert witnesses, it had to do with a disease-related outbreak. These expert witnesses were global. They weren't just local. Some were local, some were rural, some were interstate, some were international. And they had to, the team had to continually be sending these experts documents. As part of the process with using experts, the management of sending those documents has to be very closely kept track of. One, from a legal perspective, because they need to show which documents they relied on, but also just from an organizational perspective. Just when you have dozens of experts and you're constantly sending them the documents, how do you keep track of which ones you've already sent, which ones you haven't sent? So we used the software to help manage that. So actually, when you popped in the software, I was able to take some screenshots. How it actually worked was, as the team were reviewing documents, they would tag documents against certain experts, and then once kind of a certain amount were ready to be released, we would bulk tag them with the date they're released, and then the documents would automatically show up in these drop-downs for the specific expert. So, and Mr. L here logged in, he would just see a little drop-down with his name. That's all he would get, and he would see the documents that had been released to him. So it's not rocket science, this use of the software, but it was just a challenge to manage this through hard copy or traditional, maybe Excel lists and indexes, keeping track of it all. We used the software just to really manage it efficiently. Our next case study has to do with duplicates, and specifically near duplicates. Just for some background for those who aren't familiar with how this whole process works. Traditionally, if we receive any electronic documents, say 10,000 emails from a few different people, we'll run something called deduplication across this. And what that does is, if there's an email with, let's say it's from myself to my colleague, and both of our emails get collected. That's an exact duplicate email. It's just in my sent items, and it's in their inbox. So we have what's called deduplication software, which matches those two up. We can tell they're exactly the same, and then we remove one of them. Now, that's all well and good for electronic documents that are true duplicates. That we cannot replicate that process with hard copy documents. There's no way to be 100% sure that hard copy documents are duplicates without actually a human looking at them. So what you end up with, and I should also say on the electronic side, you end up with lots of versions of documents, which are just a little bit different. So we can't remove one of them. We have to keep them all. So in reality, you end up in your database, you'll have lots of, really, they will be duplicates, or they'll be very close to being duplicates, and they're scattered all throughout your database. Some are hard copies, some are electronic. So this problem, one of the ways we can deal with it is we do have software that it's called near duplicate detection software, and it analyzes the contents of the text of the document and ranks them on how close they are to each other. So what you can actually do with it is it actually groups the documents together, the suspected duplicates, and then highlights the differences. So that's generally how the software works. And how we actually used it in this case was we had a case revolving around changes in terms and conditions in contracts over a 10-year period. So we probably had about 20 different financial products, and the legal team had to review all the terms and conditions and look for differences over the years. So if you can imagine, getting out the magnifying glass and looking for that in the fine print could, well, certainly give you a headache, but it could be very time-consuming from that perspective. So what we suggested and what we ultimately did was we used this near duplicate software to lump all the similar products together. So we'll lump the same product together. And then we used the detection software to find the differences in terms and conditions. So it just kind of overlaid them and then highlighted where all the differences in terms and conditions were. So they were able to jump right to where the changes were and then see if those changes were actually relevant to what they were looking for. So look, you could do it, print all these out, and send them all over line them up all over the floor and look for differences. But this is just a much quicker, efficient way to go about it. I have a few screenshots here. So this would be, for example, over on the right, you get a list of documents. This would be potentially all the products over time being lumped together automatically. And then the actual differences are shown in this next slide, where it overlays them so it kind of looks like Microsoft track changes and shows you the differences between the documents. So you could jump right to where the differences are. More screenshots here of that. Really helpful software. Okay, my next case study has to do with how managing a review team and ensuring that what the team is doing is consistent. So unfortunately with subjective review, it's actually a significant challenge to manage a team of reviewers and have them code documents in a similar way. It sounds silly, but it's actually really hard to get review teams to follow a set of rules. And you can give them instructions, but at some point we've found that the instructions don't always get followed. So we've been working with the software to actually enforce some of the rules, and they're usually custom for each case. We talk with the senior associate, we lay out the rules, and then we kind of write them into the software. So some examples might be simple as if it's relevant, yes, it has to be coded against an issue. If somebody's marked a document as partially privileged, it needs to have a redaction drawn onto it. Really things that aren't terribly advanced, but the reality of the workflow is the team's racing through their discovery review. They get to the end, they think they're at the end, they're at their deadline, and then we check and we find there's lots of inconsistency that then takes more time, and it creates this kind of crazy night of the legal team, working all night to re-review and fix any issues. So to kind of prevent that last-minute scramble, we've been writing rules in ahead of time, so it simply won't let a reviewer move on if a document is relevant without tagging it against an issue. So they're kind of forced ahead of time to fix these kind of inconsistencies. We had a nice use case as well for this, where there was the case we had some documents, we had a chronology, so the events were quite important, and then we had a number of witnesses. So the team was preparing for witness interviews, and the chronology was really important as well. So they wanted to be able to answer questions such as, well, I have a witness coming in, I want to see all the events and all the documents that relate to this witness. I want to print them out or have them at my fingertips for when this witness comes in. And what they were finding was they had been linking events to documents, and they had been linking documents to witnesses, but they wanted to easily be able to have witnesses linked to the events themselves. So we actually just wrote some rules into the software where if a document was linked against a specific witness and it was linked against a specific event, it'll draw that connection between the witness and the event directly. So they didn't have to go through and do all this extra tagging. So it just meant that when a witness was coming in, you can easily pull back all your events and documents and be assured that kind of all the links have been drawn correctly. We also have written some nice reporting. Often the teams just want stats to see how the review is going. How many documents are they getting through? How are the different reviewers doing themselves? In the US, they use contract reviewers all the time, and they tend to just sack whoever's the slowest each week. But here it's a bit more not quite as cutthroat, but still really useful information to have. So a bit hard to see on this, but this just has various reviewers and how many documents they're reviewing, each week. And just these kind of reports being constantly updated, in the background are helpful for the senior associate managing the case. So because we have all this kind of audit history, and traditionally, it'll just be recording every time somebody looks at a document, that is recorded in the system. So we're actually able to use that information in an interesting way. Often we do, reports on reviewer efficiency, things like that. But we actually had a case where our client was successful on one of their claims, but not all of their claims. And they needed to figure out how much time and cost they'd incurred on just that claim. The problem was when they were reviewing against kind of multiple aspects, multiple kind of claims at the same time. So in their logs, it was, you couldn't tell how much time they were spending on just kind of one part of the claim as opposed to the whole kind of claim. So what we were able to do is we were able to figure out which documents related to that claim. So we were able to pull from the audit history reports on timing, the amount of time that people had spent, the reviewers had spent, on the actual documents just related to this specific claim. And this was much kind of better, more granular than the logs that had been written. And so they're able to present this, showing the time that they had spent on, just the documents related to this claim and recover costs based on that information. Okay, I'm on to our analytics case study, analytics/predictive coding. Basically, I'll give you the parameters of our, our problem that we had, and then I'll talk about what is analytics and how we used it. So we had a case with a client. They had 35,000 documents. They were manually reviewing them by mostly junior reviewers and 2 senior reviewers supervising. It was primarily a yes-no relevance review. It had about 3 months to do it. At the end, they found 8% of the documents were relevant, so really low kind of relevance scores. So the real problem with that they found was the junior reviewers were quite inconsistent in their coding with respect to relevance. They were missing relevant documents. The senior associates would review what the juniors had gone through and find that they had been missing relevant documents and have to basically re-review large chunks that they had been reviewing. So it was pretty inefficient when it came to kind of human labor, and a lot of costs were incurred, really duplication of effort. So we thought there might be a better way to do this than kind of junior reviewers. So we said there's this new technology called analytics. It's been heavily used in the US and the UK, but only recently being used here in Australia. And so we asked the questions, we were asking the questions to ourselves really, well, how effective is this new software? It's being sold to us as a way to replace lots of junior reviewers and let the machines make lots of decisions guided by senior reviewers. But the problem with any new software is it's often not understood very well by salespeople. There's lots of different features. We don't know what's really reliable, and we don't know which features are necessarily best for a specific matter. So our client agreed to work with us in this case study, re-review these 35,000 documents using this analytics technology. So I'll just go through a bit more definition here for what is analytics. So it's known as analytics, concept searching, predictive coding, technology-assisted review, clustering, there's computer-assisted review, there's all sorts of names for it. They're all pretty much the same thing. Different products use slightly different names, so sometimes it's a branding issue. Sometimes they call different features the same thing, which is confusing. But generally, if you hear this, predictive coding is, I think, my industry-neutral preference for the term. I just want to launch another poll here and ask what the familiarity is with analytics or predictive coding. From you've never heard of it, this is the first time, to you may have heard about it, read an article. It's getting a lot of press kind of in the judicial review side because it has the promise of really changing the way that legal teams operate. Okay, so a good mix there. Some have actually used it, which is great. And then it sounds like a lot have heard about it, but haven't actually seen it in action. And then a few people have never heard of it, which is not surprising if you haven't used a review platform yet. So hopefully you'll take something away from this next bit. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So basically, how this analytics technology works is it uses, well, at first I should say, a traditional keyword search works by building a list, an index of all the documents in the database, and then recording kind of which documents those words appear in. It's kind of like the index at the back of an encyclopedia, back when we used encyclopedias. So what the analytics engine does is it actually tries to figure out how documents and words relate to each other. It kind of builds a universe and based on concepts starts putting documents near each other. So one thing I like to say is imagine if you have a document talking about a pet dog and a document talking about a pet cat. The analytics engine it'll figure out that dogs and cats are related because somewhere they're being talked about as both of them pets. So it does that, but kind of on a bigger scale. Ultimately, what it can do then from this is learn concepts, because you'll start teaching it words and documents, feeding that in. So you say, all right, these 50 documents are relate to a specific issue. It's then able to determine other documents that are related to that issue. Now, before I even tell you a bit so much about how well or poorly the software, this analytics software works, I need to introduce you to two concepts on how we can judge any measure of effectiveness in a document review. So these are recall and precision. So recall is if we have a universe of documents, and say we run keywords through it, and half the documents come back, and within that set, maybe we've found 40% of the relevant documents are in our search terms. That is the concept of recall. It's how many out of the universe of relevant documents, how many are we actually pulling back that we're going to potentially review. More importantly, I think it's a better measure, or the more alarm bell is how many documents are we leaving off the table and we're missing and not reviewing them. Precision is how efficient we are at reviewing documents. Specifically, if we have a large data set we're reviewing and lots of them are not relevant, our precision is going to be really low because we're wasting a lot of time reviewing non-relevant documents. So we want a system that gives us both high recall, we're not missing relevant documents, and high precision, where we're not wasting lots of time reviewing irrelevant documents. So that's how we have to judge any system we use, whether it's human junior reviewers, whether it's keyword searching, or whether it's analytics. So the first kind of feature we wanted to test was assisted review. So what that means is we actually get our senior reviewer to look at, say, 1,000 documents, mark them relevant, not relevant, and then the system can tell us, it can learn from those decisions, and then it'll categorize the rest of your database saying, this percent are not relevant, this percent are relevant, and then it tells us how successful we are using the software by telling us our recall percentage. Now, we want to get our recall, an industry standard is somewhere around 80%, meaning we need to tweak the system until we're finding 80% of the relevant documents. Now that may sound strange that we're actually accepting that we're leaving relevant documents off the table, but effectively, as soon as we start going down the road of keyword searching, we're going to be missing relevant documents. Now, with junior reviewers, we'll get to our case study results in a moment, but there's some concerns that they're actually missing relevant documents as well. So just the takeaway from assisted review is it's an iterative process where we review 1,000, it might tell us we're 50% recall, we have to review 2,000, we're at 60%, on and on until we get to that threshold that we're happy with. So we did this in our case study. We took those 35,000 documents that were initially reviewed. We re-reviewed, we started feeding in lots of 1,000 documents at a time just to our senior reviewer. And basically, well, the first thing we did was we actually analyzed how the junior reviewers did. Put the analytics technology aside. We just analyzed how effective were the junior reviewers. So we looked at the numbers and we found that they had achieved a recall rate of about 50%. Remember, recall is recording how many of the relevant documents we're actually finding. So 50% is pretty appalling for a reviewer. That means that you put 2 documents in front of a reviewer and they missed half of them. They marked 1 is relevant and 1 is not relevant. Now, you may think, oh, well, in this particular case, we had really bad, reviewers, but I don't think that's the reality. From talking to a lot of experienced solicitors out there, it's junior reviewers, they're inexperienced, there's document fatigue, they're looking at document after document, not relevant, they miss documents. And so it was really interesting putting some metrics behind it that they actually may be missing half of the relevant documents. Okay, so how does assisted review stack up in comparison? So we had our reviewer, she reviewed about 4,500 documents, 15% of that 35,000. And at that point, she had reviewed, she was at a success rate, you can think of it as, a recall rate of 50%. So the software was as good as the junior reviewers, but having only reviewed 15% of the universe. However, we want to be better than the junior reviewer, that 50% rate. So at getting to 10,000 documents, then the software can say we're at 80% recall. it can basically take a good enough guess on the rest of the documents in that set that will have brought back 80% of all the relevant documents, which is kind of the gold standard that some of the justices are laying out that you need to get to. So I think it's a pretty strong endorsement of the technology compared to junior reviewers. Even so, saying that this set actually had a lot of hard copy documents where the OCR wasn't that great. Sometimes a document would be relevant if it had a signature, not relevant if it didn't, and the software can't really learn the difference between those. It can't read signatures. So I think we didn't have the best document set, but even saying that, we still had some pretty good results. We're going to be running our next kind of case study on comparing the effectiveness of keywords versus analytics. The studies out there that show keywords really aren't that great, and they miss a lot of documents and pull in a lot of irrelevant documents. But kind of stay tuned for the results of that. Okay, so we studied another feature of analytics called clustering. What clustering does is the goal of clustering is you have a set of documents. It could be a dump of documents you've just received from your client. It could be something you've gotten from the other side, their discovery. And what clustering does is you can point it at a set of documents, and it'll split them up into, say, 10 clusters, and it'll name each of the clusters, kind of describing what is being talked about within that cluster. So it's supposed to give you kind of a quick snapshot of what's being discussed inside this document set. You can then prioritize what appear to be relevant clusters and focus on those first and kind of put the irrelevant looking material to the end. So we wanted to judge, well, how accurate is this software? Are the cluster titles it comes up with, are they able to guide us very successfully into helping us figure out whether clusters are relevant or not? And is it lumping kind of conceptually similar documents together beneath those titles? So we had a few questions we set out to answer. And we set our senior associate, who was lovely enough to assist us with this, onto the clusters and asked her to review some of the clusters within that it had found. So the first question we asked was that, do cluster titles accurately guide us towards the clusters of documents? And then within those clusters, are they all relevant or are they all non-relevant? So we set our associate on it, and I paraphrased her here, but she selected cluster 9, quickly skimmed the document's titles to determine that the documents were relevant. She reviewed 600 documents within there, and then marked them as either relevant to the cluster and then kind of relevant to the case. So we actually analyzed those results, and we found that within those kind of 600 documents, 86% of those were actually relevant to the cluster. So that means kind of the software is working correctly. And then of the ones we reviewed, 29% were actually marked as generally relevant to the case. Now, if you remember, this case, it had really low relevance. 8% of the documents were relevant. So it is actually helping us kind of find the relevant documents in the case. And then, of course, within the cluster as well. So the next question we asked it was, it comes up with these 10 clusters. A few appear to be highly relevant. A few appear to be not relevant at all. Can we just junk the non-relevant looking clusters and not review them? So we had her review a number of clusters that appeared to be non-relevant. So she found a number, one with 1,500 docs, one with 750 docs, 500, and 100 documents. And what she found was a kind of a spread of relevance. So a few of them had almost no relevant documents at all, that 2 out of 1,500 in cluster 8. Cluster 10 had a significant number, about the average that were in the case. And then the other 2 clusters did not have any relevant documents. So what was our conclusion from this? Basically, from the first part, we can rely on the software to group together conceptually similar documents. We can't rely on the titles to just get rid of non-relevant appearing clusters. There still could be relevant documents within there, a significant number. So really what we recommend with a workflow for this then is senior associate needs to quickly skim the titles, say these look relevant, these not relevant. Start with the relevant, but still do need to review the least relevant ones, or maybe pass it off to kind of a junior reviewer. Okay, so we're getting near the end of my slides. Really, because of these various customizations, we're asked questions all the time. Can the software do this? Can I want this magic button that will do X, Y, and Z. And when we're really able to develop that kind of magic button or solution, we put a few quotes up here of actually there's this light bulb moment where the software works, it mirrors exactly what the users are trying to do in the system and manage their workflow. And it just, it's going to save me hours and hours. It's just the quote that we want to hear. So hopefully you've gotten a few insights into maybe some of the additional ways that software can help work and potentially could help you in one of your future matters. Okay, so let's see if there's been any questions, and please feel free to type in any more questions if you've been saving them to the end here. So, okay, the first question was about, I think, the near duplicate detection. What did you do with documents that were only in hard copy or image format? So, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I talk a lot about near duplicates with different versions and things. Basically, pure electronic deduplication doesn't work at all with hard copy documents. This near duplicate detection software does work with hard copy documents. It's actually a common use of the software is to use it for hard copy documents. Now that being said, it does require that the optical character recognition, that's where the software tries to figure out what the text is on the page. And so you can't have, you need a decent quality of OCR for the near duplicate software to work, because that's all it's relying on is that the text that's able to pull off the page. So if you have grainy fax documents, pictures, it doesn't really work. That being said, a lot of these kind of cases, litigation cases, do have text we can pull off. If I went and printed off a Word file right now and scanned it back in, we'd get 100% of the OCR on there. So that technology has come a long way with hard copy documents. So we're able to use that quite a bit for near duplicate technology. Okay, so the next question was, are you using natural language processing tools for search purposes? So Sally, that near duplicate detection does not use the natural language processing, but analytics, I would describe that as natural language processing. So you can do a concept search with the analytics. You can type in a question or a paragraph, and it'll find you documents related to those words. You don't have to worry about your syntax like you would with keyword searching. So that kind of natural language processing, that kind of Google style where you can put in a few words and it somehow magically knows what you're talking about, that's what predictive coding analytics is trying to do, not that kind of near duplicate detection. That's much more basic. Okay, and then Philip, your question. If you can't eliminate supposedly non-relevant clusters, isn't it better to just get all the documents reviewed in the first place? Well, the thing is, you're right in the sense that we can't be eliminating documents altogether with that feature. We potentially could with the assisted review, because we actually get some stats around how confident we are with not reviewing certain sections. With clustering, it's really just a way to focus the review. So it would be typically with made kind of a decision, we do need to review these. It might be documents from the other side, potentially, which are all supposed to be relevant, but in reality probably aren't. But at least you can focus your review. So that means, say you have a reviewer who's been assigned a cluster, at least all the documents in that cluster have to do with the same concept. So if you think about in your email, like if you reviewed them in date order, traditionally, that's what the legal team always asks, I want to see these in date order. Date order is actually a terrible way because it's just the concepts are jumping all over the place, and mentally you're kind of switching gears all the time. To have the clustering assemble documents as they're all related to each other, even if they're probably mostly not relevant, at least you're kind of looking at similar documents one in a row, so you can review it much faster than if you're reviewing kind of all over the place. Hopefully, Philip, that answers your question there. And Sally, can we receive copies of the slides? Absolutely. A very helpful guide to corporate lawyers struggling with demand for business intelligence and contract management. Yeah, we're just seeing kind of this technology. Well, it probably has been used in kind of for business intelligence, but we're actually seeing some of the products that we use in the discovery space kind of backing up early along the chain, even before litigation comes in, to be able to analyze documents kind of in the corporate environment. That's kind of information governance that's often referred to as. There's software out there which in real time can be analyzing emails as they're being written. So as soon as that email is sent, it gets analyzed and assessed internally for is there a risk of fraud, misbehavior, and gets forwarded on to compliance or HR based on the contents of those emails, and not just from keywords, but using this kind of predictive coding analysis. So totally big brother type of world we may be going into using this technology. So you can see from the business perspective, they want to keep track of what their teams are doing and if there's kind of any potential risks earlier on rather than when the litigation arrives. And Philip, for what it's worth, I also have weekly reviewer team meetings with a reward for the best document found. Human factor is still very relevant in this kind of work. Absolutely, Philip. And that's a fantastic idea. I love the idea of a reward. I'll have to come up with something on my next review for a good reward to give. But I think it's really important to say is analytics, predictive coding, it is not replacing humans in its entirety at all. It still requires a trained, switched-on senior reviewer to be able to guide the software. The software really isn't that great without kind of some human input. And look, we may be reducing junior reviewers and a lot of that manual kind of grunt work. That may be being replaced, but certainly not all the legal team. And even with Philip's example, the human factors that they find this great document, well, let's feed that great document into the system and ask it to find documents that are similar to it, and then get the kind of human reviewers to review. So definitely not replacing the lawyer quite yet. Okay. Any other questions in the text box there? I don't see anyone typing, so, potentially, just one more. Okay. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for attending today. I believe the slides will be emailed around later, and we're recording this, so it is a video available for download later at any time. Feel free to contact myself or our team, any questions you've seen today that you want to know more information about. Okay, thank you very much for attending today.